Question over there from Mark, and then this gentleman over here.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the Bible. It's going on in the New Testament. Jesus talks often in parables. Simple story to relatively, I guess, uneducated disciples. And it's really like a literal story meant to tell a local message. Why do you generally insist on taking the Bible literally instead of a metaphor where, say that most so generally have no problem with, science, evolution, things like that, because they're not taking the literal message. What's your justification for taking it literally?
That's a fantastic question. The Bible, I do take the Bible literally, but not every verse literally, in the same way that when you read poetry, you don't take that literally as well. There's different genres of the Bible. Not every book of the Bible is written in the same genre of literature. So we play by the rules of the game of that genre of literature. When we read poetry, we understand there's metaphor and symbolism and all of these things. And when we read prose or historical narrative, we treat that in a more literal sense. When Jesus says, for instance, if your right hand causes you to sin or your right eye causes you to pluck out, or causes you to sin, cut your right hand off or cut your right eye out, and it's better to enter heaven without your members than to enter hell with all of your members. The reason I don't take that literally is because it's overstatement, number one, according to the genre there. But also, it wouldn't accomplish what Jesus was looking for there. Cutting out my right eye or cutting off my right hand is not going to do away with lust, which is what he's after. That's an issue of the heart. So we look at the different genres of Scripture, identify the genre, and we play according to the rules of that genre of literature, as you would in any other work that you read.
So the issue of metaphors and literalism is a pretty interesting one. And generally when I debate here, I assume the Bible is going to take it literally. So I'm glad this question was asked, so I can address modern Christians as well. The stories in the Bible that can be taken metaphorically don't have good morals. The story of Adam and Eve. What does that mean as a metaphor? Don't think for yourself. The story of Jephthah. I don't know how to pronounce that name. The man who says, I will, if I win this battle, I'll kill the first thing that walks through my door. And he wins the battle and wishes to go home and has to sacrifice his daughter. The story of the story of Abraham, who was so willing to sacrifice Isaac. What moral can this story have? Why are we supposed to cherish? Why are we supposed to respect a man who is willing to kill his own child? Even if God is so merciful that at the last second he says, I'm really just joking, but you don't have to murder your son. It doesn't matter if it's literal or metaphorical, because taken as metaphorically as you want, the morals aren't sound anyway.
Go in the center. That is
Yeah, so this question's more or less directed to Adam. I know you're kind of getting involved in it right now. And it's about the age of the Earth. I don't know that much about the age of the universe, but I know a little bit about how we date the age of the Earth. And there's multiple methods, starting with chronology, getting to radiometric, potassium argon. So there's multiple lines that evidence converge on the idea that we have the world is 4.3, 4.5 million years old, somewhere around there. And there's something you said that God created things with the appearance of age. So if all our information is showing that it's 4.3 billion years old, and God can do this, He can make it look like that. Why would He do that?
That's a fantastic question. I think it's a very fair question. That's because He does not want us to relate to His creation without regard to Him. So we must go to Him for truth. And so our pursuit of wanting to know these things, it's not cruelty or meanness. He created us, so we are the created. He is the creator. So He's doing this so that we will turn to Him for His revealed truth, to know the truth. We will not be able to live our lives independent of Him, which is, quite frankly, what was going on in the Garden of Eden. That's exactly what was going on. It's a very fair question.
I basically asked the same question. I obviously can't answer this. I will say, though, that we can also use, uranium to date the age of the soul.
Yeah, there's a couple more thermoluminescence.
Okay.
It all depends on the age range you want to date.
Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't get into this.
There's a gentleman over there.
This is a question for both Adam and Johnny. Johnny, at one point in your introduction, you mentioned that you don't believe the spiritual realm.
Sorry?
You said in your introductory speech that you don't believe that there's a spiritual realm.
Just can everyone hear his question?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
No, I've got it. Make sure they can hear.
I think, in my opinion, this is my opinion, but I think the most convincing arguments for evidence for Christianity is spiritual evidence. But if I presented spiritual evidence to you, that would be automatically discredited in the field of the spiritual realm. If I was, I believe it's Taoist, I would believe that everything is spiritual and there's nothing physical. And therefore, all the physical evidence.
Perhaps you should maybe talk about this.
All the physical evidence that you use would be automatically discredited by me because my worldview there's nothing physical.
There's nothing physical, sorry?
Nothing physical in that kind of a worldview, which is a very popular worldview in certain parts of the world. And also, as a side note to the same point, I've witnessed a lot of naturalistic apologists, a lot of Christian apologists, who will argue completely opposite points using exactly the same evidence. I've engaged in debates with different people using the same evidence to get completely different conclusions. Therefore, based on this evidence, could it not be argued, this is Christian propaganda, could it not be argued that what we interpret as true, or what we accept as true, is not based in facts alone, but rather our interpretation of truth? And therefore, I cannot convince you of what I believe, you cannot convince me of what I believe based on facts, because we are going to interpret these facts in different ways, and therefore, showing the facts is not either.
So I do, a premise I do assume from the get-go is that I have a reasonable interpretation of what I see, right? Whenever I make any kind of claim, I have to assume that I'm not a brain floating in a tank, and I'm not completely psychotic. Because if I was either of those things, there would be no claim for me to make. There'd be, right? Like if the world was not at least to some degree what I see, if it was something completely different, and while I'm sitting here, I'm actually in a padded cell somewhere, there would be absolutely nowhere I could get using logic, right? So an assumption I do make is that, you know, the world around me that I see is at least somewhat close to what actually exists. So when I see a physical world, I assume that there is a physical world. I don't discount the spiritual world. What I say is that spiritual evidence can be easily explained, you know, through things like psychology, right? People get hunches. We know that people get hunches. We can see when people have emotional reactions, spiritual reactions. You can see that they have maybe chemical reactions in their brains. So testimonial evidence isn't totally valid, and spiritual evidence isn't valid because it relies solely on one person's claim. We have no way to validate that claim. And more to the point, you have no way to validate that claim to yourself, because if you have like some kind of spiritual experience, it could just be, you know, some emotion you're feeling for some other kind of reason.